Welcome to the show, Henry. We're so glad to have you. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Henry O'Connell. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Canary Speech. And a story about myself is best told in how it intertwines with Jeff Adams. Jeff and I, 9 years ago, met in a bagel shop on University Avenue near Brigham Young University. He had been speaking to the college, to students that day, and at noon we met for lunch. I related to him a story about my daughter and who he knows well. And when she would come home from high school after soccer practice, walking across the room, I could tell from her gait that it was a good day or a bad day. When she turned and looked at me, her facial expressions told me even more. And when, as a parent, I would ask the question, which we all do, and the answer we all get is the same. I'd ask her, "How was your day?" And her answer was fine. And she would continue to walk. And I knew it wasn't. So I would say, time out, and bring her back. And we would talk. And was it chemistry? Was it math? Was it the soccer coach? What was it? And I said to Jeff, as you know, Caitlin has graduated from college. She's married. She has her first child. Not my best day. I'd still have her living in the home, but she lives with her husband and her child outside. And I said, something that I've noticed, I call her twice a week, I'll admit at least to that. And when I call her, and it has nothing to do with the words that she's speaking, and it's irritatingly accurate. And I don't have the physical cues. I can't see her face. I can't see her gait. I can't see her body language. I know if it's a good day or bad day. I know if she's happy or she's sad or she's excited. I know all those things. And I said, I believe that's what clinical team and patients do with patients every day, every single day. They're sitting with them and the patient is telling them one thing, and their intuition, their training, their expertise, their experience tells them something else. And they begin to explore that path with a patient to get to a diagnosis. I said, if we're doing that, how are we getting that done? And Jeff said, I don't know. And I said, if we could determine that and we could model that, that would be a tremendous companion for a clinical team. An objective measurement of the same things they're reading themselves, just a confirmation. So that's how Canary Speech got started.
Could you walk us through a little bit about how this works? I know a lot of it is proprietary, but could you tell us a little bit about just kind of in general terms, layman's terms, what this is doing and how, if you know how it's doing what it's doing?
So there are 2,590 features of speech, the core features plus their derivatives, that we track every 10 milliseconds. Now, functionally, we're tracking them every 25 milliseconds with a 10 millisecond slide. It generates about 15.5 million data elements every minute of speech. We generally analyze with about 40 seconds of speech. What we did was we pulled all of those feature sets out of audio in concert or in partnership with clinical institutions, the Harvard, Beth Israel, Hackensack Meridian, NYU, many of them in the US and in other parts of the world, the National Institutes of Health in Japan, several in Europe. So we're working with these institutions that are analyzing or diagnosing disease in a specialty group. If it's Alzheimer's, it's a neurology group. If it's behavioral health, it's a group of psychiatrists. And we pair up with them the capture of audio, 40 seconds from each participant, and their diagnosis, which is the label. The label is the determination of the specialty team, the clinical team. We then take those, extract these features, millions of them, 12.5, 15 million features, and machine learning likes that large data set. And then we match the diagnosis with the features and build an algorithm. And then the question arises, how applicable is that algorithm across populations? across languages, across accents, and we can talk about that later. But all of that comes from due diligence and science. Then the rest of it is you, after training a model, you test that model and its accuracy against different populations. And we've done that in different, for instance, English models are tested in the US, Canada, England, Ireland, Australia, in English as a second language. And we tested across all 50 states to know that accents don't impact on it. So once you've captured the audio, um, and we can talk about how we make that practical in a clinical environment. Once the audio is captured, it takes milliseconds to process it and return scores in real time. So the clinical team can effectively have information about a dozen or more diseases while they're still sitting with the patient. Kind of like a blood profile, they have a vocal profile.
So you mentioned a bunch of conditions. I've heard a few neurologic, so Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's. What about things like anxiety, depression, other some of the more commonplace conditions?
So we also have a range of behavioral health models: anxiety, depression, stress, mood, fatigue, energy levels. We also will launch PTSD shortly, and we're working also on postpartum depression.
Could you walk us through a little bit about where you see this in the next, say, 6 to 12 months, and then down the road, where do you think this could go 5 years and beyond as we continue to improve on our capabilities?
So we've launched now in healthcare with Microsoft. While they're doing clinical dictation that on audio between a doctor and a patient, so you get a patient's dictation and a doctor's dictation, they're also providing within their AI structure other services. And Canary Speech ends up being a component of that AI platform. And what we're providing is then a sense of the individual's cognitive or behavioral health or other things, some of the progressive neurological diseases we talked about. We're working with hospitals that are doing, from age 50 and on, they're doing a full panel of progressive neurological diseases. Accuracies for these are so high that if you're going to screen someone for MS, and MS often goes, as you know, undiagnosed for years, decades even, we're hoping that model, it'll launch late this year, will provide a screening as an early warning screening, and then a referral can be made based on objective information. I think that's where we're seeing it. We're working with clinics that want to do that entire screening set, or are using it for behavioral health, specifically behavioral health, and then we focus, of course. We're also deployed in like the Zoom platform for virtual healthcare, where you're at home, but you need a meeting and you sign on and you get to meet your doctor while you're sitting at your home. Canary Speech is integrated fully into that. And again, exactly like the interaction I talked about, it's just listening to the conversation. And so it's providing the doctor on their side with a panel of information about the patient.
Could you talk a little bit about false positives, and how do you deal with those? And is this the data set so huge that those kind of get weeded out in the whole process?
Well, the very high accuracy models, 98, 99% accuracies have very, very little. And these are clinical decision support information. They're objective. It's nice to have them, but ultimately the doctor looks at them, given their expertise, given their experience, given the other things they're seeing at the same moment. It becomes a component of their decision about how to treat the patient, what the diagnosis is. The diagnosis is made by the doctor. So false negatives and false positives are elements of any measurement. And what you try to do is you try to minimize those through training. In our case, training, experience, reducing the impact of noise. All those things are all built into the models. Training across all 50 states, so you're taking into account different noise characteristics, different accents, different voices, which we don't think impacts on it. But nonetheless, you train it because we're scientists. That's what you do. And when you combine that with LLM, that's one of the beauties you have, because they're going to have potential false negatives or false positives. However, they're looking at it from a different angle. And so now you have these two different angles looking at it, and you can compare those pieces of data. And probably the best machine learning tool currently on planet Earth is right in the head, right here. They're looking at all these pieces of information, and their experience and 100,000 other things come together in milliseconds for them to make a decision about the next appropriate treatment for a patient. And that's where I think we really have to depend on the expertise, the training, and the experience of the individuals that we trust.